You emoji for the face too.
Yeah. No, I won't use my Memoji. That got mixed reviews. Some people thought it was creepy. Some people thought it was funny. It's creepy how much it looks like me, I think is the, it just doesn't get the gray in my beard. Anyway, I'll cut all of that out. Actually, I won't. It'll probably still be there. So we're here to talk about how to lead a board game night or how to develop one online. And I'm sure most of you can figure it out because you're community organizers and you do all that sort of thing. I just want to share, you know, my little journey with it. And you have a few folks, Pat O'Donnell's on here, and her husband Denny was on earlier, and someone else from the Linda Downs earlier, the veterinarian. So, you know, some folks who are popping in. You know, we probably have, I would say, about 10 people who would potentially come. We've had some random visitors. You know, when I came here, my hope was to start a in-person gaming thing, and then when COVID hit, I just thought, you know, again, roll and rights. At that time, I had one roll and write. I had Imperial Settlers, and I'll show you that in a second. And I didn't really enjoy it. Brian and I had tried it on a trip once, and we were like, this is not, you know, actually it was Silos too. We all tried it, but none of us liked it. And so I was kind of like turned off by it. But I was introduced to Welcome To about a year ago, and that was okay. Like I was, you know, but all of a sudden, in the midst of the COVID pandemic sort of thing, it was like roll and rights could really work. And so I just, you know, announced that we were going to do a game night, and we have probably have that early on there was some interest, and then people came on, and I think some people struggled. You know, Zoom is just a hard technology to use anyways, but to try to learn a game over it is challenging too. But we, you know, we leave player sheets out in the front of our church in the narthex, so people could swing by and pick one up, and then I started actually taking them and scanning them, or taking a picture of them and sort of putting them in a PDF and then posting them on our website. So if you go to like lakecitypresbyterian.org, there's a menu called Games Up Here, and then that's where every week that we do a new game, I would post the rules. I'd go find the PDF rules of the game. I'd post a video that I thought was decent of explanation of the game, just so you could see a little review or how it's played. And then I posted whatever player sheet I was going to use, just because at that time people aren't necessarily leaving. But and then we just sort of let it go. And every few weeks we played Welcome To for, I mean, I want to say maybe even like 6 weeks or something, and then we started mixing it up a little. And so really, you know, and every week from the pulpit, I tell people to join us, and every now and then you have someone jump in, but in general, it kind of what we were talking about earlier, there are folks who like the game and folks who don't like the game. And I do think, though, that broadening that circle, it means being invited into the right game, and that right game not just fills the immediate, you know, connection for that person, but I think sometimes opens up a broader understanding that there are lots of games out there. I'm sure there are probably, you know, in some of you who are still involved in youth ministry or connected to your youth ministry, that this, I think games are a great way to give them something to do and during the pandemic time. And because they're so seeking those social activities in a way that differently than perhaps adults would be, that those are incredible opportunities for that. And to have a repertoire of them is great too. And the challenge, I will say, and I think I'm learning slowly, is you typically are the one who's going to have to explain the game. Even if you send them someone a video and they watch it, videos never really, unless you actually send them a proper how-to, and those are often longer than maybe necessary. But unless they're going to invest the time to watch a 25-minute video on how to play a game, they really want you just to give them the nuts and the bolts and get them going. And that's kind of, and roll and rights aren't so complicated. I probably have over-explained them here, but again, I'd rather explain them and be able to play them with you all than have to, you know, nuance it. Man, and there are more complicated ones than the ones that are out there that we've played. So let me pause there. I do want to shift to the games and show you some of the games that we've played that we're not playing here at TOPCON, and then show you some of the ones that I am tinkering with to introduce to our little gaming crowd in the future. So any thoughts or questions thus far? No? Okay. Well, you saw Railroad Inc. and you played that, and Rolling Ranch and Welcome to. Those were the then there's this, and this was a Kickstarter, and this is called On Tour, and it's a good game. It also comes with these pads, and you can play as many as you want, and you can actually print these out, and there are colored maps that you can find online. And actually, if you look on our website, I've downloaded one of them. But basically, it's a map of the United States. And each of these spaces there are white letters that indicate the state that it's in. Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico down there. And then there are regions represented. And what you're doing is essentially you're rolling, I think these are maybe 10-sided dice. And you're rolling these and you get 2 digits. Like if it's a 1 and a 5, you'd have to put a 15 and a 51 down. Or if it's a 6 and a 2, you put 26 and 62 and so on and forth. So ultimately what you're trying to do is you can only go in an ascending tour. So at some point at the end of the game, you're going to draw a line from city to city that goes through all of the numbers that you put. So it's pretty expansive in the sense of you're putting a lot of stuff on the board, and you're having to kind of plan ahead. You get a lot of dead ends. We played it once or twice, and folks in our group were like, "Yeah, it's okay," but it's like Railroad Inc. is thinking. But it does very easily scale up to as many people as you want it. They can download that sheet, and really then you're showing them cards that tell them what region those numbers have to go to, and then the numbers themselves. Silver and gold we're going to play next, so I'm not even going to talk about that, but that is Phil's game, and that actually technically is not a roll and write. It's been adapted by me, but here is a 2-player roll and write called King Domino Duel, and it actually probably plays best as a 2-player. We played it for a few weeks now and adapted it a little bit, but essentially you're rolling shields, and you're putting 2 of the 4 dice together as shields, and then you're trying to group your shields in regions or domains on the board, and the more you have in a section, the more points you earn. It is a technically 2-player game, but we played it as a group game. It wasn't bad. It wasn't anyone's favorite. I don't think anyone felt it was painful. And Pat and Danny, you can chime in if you have a different opinion. Yes.
It was okay.
This was my first one, Imperial Settlers, and this is one that just in terms of is a good one to have around. You could play with this in a large group, and what you have in this is basically you're rolling wood, vegetables, or stones, and then you have sheets, and it's kind of cute because eventually, like, you need a certain thing to, if you can collect vegetables or collect wood or collect stones, and that allows you to do things. And then down here you have a little narrative here, so you can build bridges, and then when you build a bridge, you open up a new territory that you can then draw resources from, and when you pull like a resource from it, you put an X over it. So it's kind of a resource management game. It's fiddly. I've never returned to it. I don't know if I could recommend it, but I might revisit it sometime because I haven't played it for a while, and maybe now that I've played other roll and writes, it's better. Floor Plan is one that we haven't played here, and one that we probably will at some point. It is not really that complex in the sense of its basic strategy, but that the drawings that you actually have to participate in doing are a little complicated. The only thing you're rolling are 2 dice, and in those 2 dice, when you roll them, you basically start drawing a map. And so your choices are on one side. If you take whatever numbers let's just say I roll them, and it was not here about this 2 by, let's say the result was a 2 and a 5. I could either draw a 2 square by 5 square space like an outline, like a room, and then I have a choice. Each of the pip values have, if it's a 1, it can be a closet. If it's a 2, it can be a washroom. If it's a 3, it can be a bedroom. 4 is a kitchen. 5 is a dining room. So if I did a 2 by 5, I could either make it a really big washroom or I could make it a dining room. And then I have to label it as such. Or the other side gives you, for each of those values, gives you 1 tree, doors, windows. And so you're basically using the results of 2 dice to construct, and that was my first attempt. There's even a tree one, and this is a patio back here that was eventually going to fill in and be a pool. So that's kind of what I did there. You get to put some accoutrements in the inside. So I probably went to more detail than it was. I was just fooling around. So, but this it's sort of a floor plan. It's called Floor Plan. It's by the same people who make. Shoot, which one? Is it Welcome to? Blue.
Is that competitive?
Deepwater. Oh yeah, Welcome to. This it is competitive, but this is something that can be played. And then what they do is they give you these request cards. It's like someone wants a large porch and a reflecting pool. Someone wants a bonus room. Someone else wants a pool view. And so you're trying to earn the bonus points by fulfilling the architectural requests. And so, but you get different ways of people laying it out, because some people will choose to put accents and doors and windows and things in the houses. Other people will create rooms out of those 2 roles. So I've fooled around a little. It's really interesting. The base mechanic of it is interesting. We'll play that here eventually. All right. 3 more, because the other 2 we'll play tonight. Quicks is a very. Have you played Quicks?
I love Quicks. That's the most
Quicks
basic, least fiddly game you got.
This is a good introduction game.
Yep.
And that basically is you have dice that you're rolling, and you can you combine them with one or the other, and it kind of in other words, and this is one that you have to roll from here. And I had to tweak how we drew these, because again, these games are designed for, some of them are only designed for 4. This is 2 to 5 players, so the way people draft dice will be different. But people are putting numbers, and basically they cross out a number, but once you cross out one on one side, you can't ever go back. So you're kind of putting X's, so you get down here, and the first person to close off 3 of those, I think the game ends. And then you're really just counting your X's in each row and doing them times multipliers at the bottom. So in terms of a introduction game, you have to tweak and I don't remember offhand what I did with the rolling, but you really, it's just a simple, all you're doing is putting X's, count up the X's at the end. That's how many points you get. And notice that these go from low to high, these goes from high to low. So they kind of, you have a reverse with the 2 numbers. And so sometimes you can mix them up and put them where they're gonna go. A lot of roll and write games have things called active players and passive players, and there are ways to simulate that when you have a larger crowd. It's harder though sometimes, because when you're an active player in games, you're supposed to have an advantage, and that means the game is designed around a 4 or 5 player game, that every 4 or 5, 3 to 5 turns, you're going to have that advantage to you. So then you run into the challenge of, the larger your grand group, at some point you're going to run into the situation of, how do you advantage people in an appropriate measure that is consistent with the game as a whole, because sometimes it'll throw the whole thing off. This is called That's Pretty Clever, or Ganz schön clever in German, and this was actually nominated for the Die Spiele des Jahres one year, and it did not win it, but it is both a solo game and a group game, and there are, again, ways to tweak it. It comes with just colored dice, and in it you will roll all of them, and then the active player would choose 3 of them, and all the inactive players get to use 1. So this was a case where we had to kind of figure out how we're going to do that, and we've never played it in a huge amount. because that would throw it off, because really every third turn or fourth turn, you're supposed to be able to put 3 dice down. So what I had to do is kind of total up the amount on an out, and you play through rounds. So on a 6-person round, on a 1 to 2 player, you get 6 rounds. So that means there are so many times you're supposed to have X number of dice, and then on the off one, you only get 1. But all that's to say is it's a real simple game in the sense of the colored dice are associated with these colored areas: blue, yellow, green, orange, and purple. And on these top 2, you're just putting X's. So for example, if there's a yellow 2, you put an X there, and then you got a yellow 1 and you chose that, and then eventually you got a yellow 5, and let's say, and then you have all these X's going across, then you get this bonus orange 4, and you go down here and put that down here, and let's say you're down here, and then you get, and then that triggers an X up here. And so you get, what happens is about a third to halfway through the game, you start to make some of these connections. Same way here, you're going this way, you get these bonuses here, and the fox just gives you bonuses at the end. But basically you're building, and I'll tell you this, I picked this game up in Columbus when Judah and I went back, and my son and I went back, and I played it. We played it there, and I played it on the plane, and it was horrible. I was like, this game is dumb. I can't score very high, and I don't understand it. And so on the plane, I was like, I'm just gonna, so I hammered out 3 games in the plane. Judah's looking at me like, why aren't you watching movies? And I'm like, no, I got to figure this game out. So, and then finally at one point I got home, like on my 5th play, it made sense. And I probably should have read something on earlier, but it essentially is if you start to build toward those triggers, the goal is to try to get those triggers to feed each other. So it requires planning and a little knowing of it, but it's a great solo game. I've played many games, just, it's kind of like just a puzzly type thing. And in a solo game, you just roll the 6 dice, and on one turn you would take 3, and on the next turn you would take the 3 highest or something, or the 3 landed, the 3 closest to the box or something, and you take those away as if someone chose them, and then you choose from whatever's left. So random removal and drafting, but I highly recommend this. And there is a follow-up one that's called Twice as Clever, and I have not played that, but apparently it is twice as clever. And the last one that I have for you is called Cartographers, and it's called a role player tale. And I think it's to me it sells it overreaches with the narrative that there's somehow like a tale behind it, because I was kind of expecting more, and there is a little bit, but this is a card-driven game like Welcome To, and essentially, maybe I'll just show you the back and show you the box. But you get goals, and then you're going through 4 seasons, and each season you'll score one of the different. So the goals will change, and you'll score 2 of the different. Like spring would be A and C, and summer would be B and A, and fall would be another one. So, and what they are is each season it's scoring. Like this one will say, oh, if wheat fields and rivers are next to one another, you'll get points for that. Or if I don't know what that says, but or if you have all your forest on the side of the adjacent to the edge of the map, and then so basically you're drawing this in this little map, and where's the where? So you start drawing, and you get little houses and little trees and a little river. And I didn't get very far in this one. And these are supposed to be fields over here of grains. But you kind of get, and I've been looking at the way different people draw them. You can kind of get kind of a Tolkien Lord of the Rings sort of map at the end if you actually play it right. I think they should have given you those images to do it down, because I saw a couple of them online that looked like it was like a Lord of the Rings map. And this one is a little bit more, and it's kind of supposed to there is a little bit of a narrative to it, but it's not a narrative, I think, that really drives it. In the end of the day, you're really just putting polyomino pieces out on the boards, and you're fashioning them in. Now, what's unique about this, I think, amongst the other ones, is that it is using this and the one we'll play next with Phil, Silver and Gold, are really the only 2 that really, I think, fully utilize the polyomino aspect of the drawing the shape. Most of those games, you're like rotating them and putting them down. But I do think that those also create a challenge for people who are not spatially minded or oriented, it's hard to sometimes rotate and see how those things will fit, and it can be frustrating. So the last two are games that we're going to play tonight. One's the Harvest Dice, where you're putting vegetables, and then the other is Bloom, where you're pulling orders for flowers and pulling flowers out of your garden beds to sell to customers. So, and you'll have a chance to play. And those are both great. I guess maybe I'll show them to you so you can see them. But Harvest Dice is that's kind of like a little like Rolling Ranch, but it's a little lighter, I think, because basically you're just trying to put all your tomatoes, carrots, or lettuce in groupings by depending on what color die you choose. And then the same thing with Bloom, as you have the board on the back, but you're basically drafting a die from all of these. And then if you took a purple 3, then you could circle 3 flowers, and then whoever completely exhausts all their colors of flowers after circling them all gets the bonus points, and that triggers the end of the game. So also another light one. We'll play it tonight when everyone's tired of playing games, but fun and enjoyable as you feel like you're accomplishing something. So and that's it. There are probably, I would say, at least another, I don't know, maybe a dozen roll and write games out there. It's not like it feels like it's saturated because there's so many that have recently come out in the last few years. But I think with this pandemic stuff and people, and this being a medium that people are recognizing that they can play online, I think the roll and writes will probably see a continued growth. So that's my game review. I do think the value of starting a game group is great, even if not everyone takes advantage of it. And I think when we go back to being in person, having a game library for all ages to play with and to use, and to be able to have a third thing to interact over. And I think that's the challenge that we have, in particular with intergenerational formation. The question is what do older people and younger people have in common? A lot, but sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle, and having something that is a third thing that allows that sense of connection to be mediated is a great way to get different generations intersecting. So, all right, that's all I got to say. Any questions? Anything? You have any questions about any games or anything related to starting a game group?
You were talking about your dice and having challenges when you have to have an active player and a passive player. The way we got around that, it may not be economical, is that we actually, for our youth, we gave all of them 10 sets of dice. They're all different colors. And so when we play a game that requires 5 dice and the active player is and we'll tell them it's these dice, they take their physical dice, they roll, they say what they have, they pull their color, everyone looks then at their own color. So kind of redoing it in front of you without rolling all of it. And it's worked fairly well.
On Zoom? And everyone's on Zoom?
Yeah, we're all on Zoom. And so we were able to, we're a small youth group of 7 kids or so. And Andy and I just went around to all the homes and gave them a Ziploc bag of dice. And then we also gave them all the sheets and we laminated them so that,
oh, nice.
And gave them a dry erase marker in there so that we could replay the games and not have to worry about printing out in there.
Oh, nice.
And they just have their little bag of dice stuff, and
like a game pack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we gave them a game pack.
And you can find dice, bulk dice, online or anywhere. We did the same thing for games. We bought a bunch of dice and delivered them out. Now, whether they kept them or not, next time we get ready to play, well, I may have to deliver some more, but yeah.
Oh no, see, if they lose their dice, it's penalty points in the game. Because they don't have that color. Sorry, you're out of it. So they've done pretty good of keeping track of it. But yeah, 100 dice of the colored dice, I think ran us like $9, something like that. So the bulk dicing on Amazon is fairly cheap.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've done for online gaming is taken some of the party games and created them and played them, and using breakout rooms then as as your team. And so you could team plot or whatever, and then we come back together. One that works nice is Wits and Wagers, where we throw out the question, we hit them into the break room. And what's nice about it is you can put a time limit. So they see you have 1 minute and they have to come back and give the answer. And then we have multi-camera, so we can hit a camera on the board and they cast their votes and we do it with pins for them. So some of the party games work fairly well with that too. Charade or reverse charades is kind of an interesting one too, and having everyone do something on the screen. They think they're connected, that the person right next to them is the same person next to everyone, but it's not. And so when they're trying to act like they're handing something to that person and they're really over on the other side, can be good time humorous in that.
Yeah, Alex.
I think Bill might have answered part of this. I think one of the challenges with doing things on Zoom is sometimes you never know how many people are going to join. And I would imagine that, I mean, I've never played Roll and Write, and so I'm not quite sure, but I would imagine most of these games, are meant for 8 to 10 players. Are there any like Roll and Write games or any games that you would recommend where it doesn't matter how many, like there is no like max capacity of players that can join?
That Welcome To that we played this morning is 0 to 99 or 0 to 1,000. It really doesn't. I mean, at some point it's just chaos. I'm sure because there's so many people on the screen. But theoretically, you could be the card flipper for all of them. That On Tour. I don't know if you had seen that. So did you play Welcome To this morning with us, Alex? I don't remember.
No.
This one On Tour, and then the Welcome To. Welcome to Your Perfect Home. Also 1 to 99. Really, could be, and then the floor plan itself is 1 to 99 too. Anything that shows really, and it doesn't say that, but the rolling ranch, there's nothing about that prohibits that from being from. And so you got 4 games right there that you have that really could have 100 people on them, and it really doesn't make a difference. So the floor planning game appealed to the artistic person. Yeah, I think so. That, and I actually think that cartographers also would too. In particular, if you like the idea of a Lord of the Ring type style map. Again, both of them use a grid type format. So if someone has a difficulty rotating things in their head, that might be a challenge. But
Great, thank you.
any other thoughts, comments?
And Jason, I think you made a comment that there's only a handful of Roll and Writes. Currently at the moment, there's over 500.
What?
Yes.
500 Roll and Writes?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I would never have expected any.
It had a surge recently.
What's that?
But yeah, I just did a quick search of it, and I come 473 plus another 100 off of another angle. So yeah, there's over 500.
Well, and then you're probably looking at that the games that use that as a mechanic. So it may be the case where, is that actual games or is that classification of mechanics?
That's actual games that are that style of a game.
Well, is there a way to transpose that list to post in TOPCON?
Probably not easy. It's just a search off of Board Game Geek.
Okay.
That's your Roll and Write game mechanism.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of those are all published in the U.S. either, because there's a lot of.
In 2020, there's already about 30 that have come out.
My gosh, I had no idea. There you go. So there's an endless supply. I don't know. Honestly, it'd be interesting to see how they take the mechanic farther, because there's a point where you kind of do feel like you start to see the overlap. Even in the, like I said, I only have about a dozen of them, but I already see a bit of overlap. Anyone else?
Which of those do you think are best? Which do you think are best for younger kids? I work with some like 3rd through 5th graders. So
that's like
Bloom
8-year-olds.
8 to 10, yeah.
I would say Quicks is definitely good. This Duel, now again, that's not a huge crowd. That's not like a big one. you would have to do that with just let them kids play together. Bloom as well. Game right games in general tend to be kind of targeted, I think, at 8-year-olds. If I could, I mean, I know they have different categories, but I think in general, like a lot of their good games, they're Harvest Dice would also be one, and I would probably say that of all the ones that I've showed you, these would probably be the 4 that I would say for that. Unless you have kids who play games, if you have kids who have grown up as gamers, board gamers, then I would say you probably could you could go to some of the other ones. But most 8-year-olds, this is an unfamiliar concept. Just the idea. I mean, if any of them have actually played Yahtzee, but
Those are good. I'm gonna try it with my elementary kids.
Rolling Ranch, I would think, be a good one.
Rolling Ranch, yeah, I think an 8-year-old probably can handle that. I don't know much younger. I mean, and not that you couldn't. I think the challenge becomes not that you can't put the number. If it was just the animals going into the pens, but I think you are on somewhat unequal footing, because the idea of how building those buildings will ultimately benefit you require several step processing. If I do this, then I get this, and then that results in this, as opposed to just I'm trying to fill spaces. So but again, there are ways that you can take stuff out of game. I mean, when we played one of those where there was a selection process, well, that's pretty clever, which I think is fantastic. A lot of people don't like it, but rather, it's supposed to be that when you take a die, anything lower than that is given to the other people to choose from. So if I choose a 4 and there's a 2 there, then the 2 goes to become the general pool die. So instead of doing that, you just make it, someone's going to choose 3. Who cares? You simplify it for the sake. And I think sometimes you got to simplify them for the sake of online stuff, because there's just something lost in translation. And it's frustrating because you can't, you got to hold your sheet up and whatever frustrations you had with me as I'm holding a sheet up, shaking, and I'm pointing my pencil at something that you can't see because the internet's not good. That's, I guess because I've been doing this for the last 7 months, that doesn't bother me to do it. But when people can't get, when there's a miscommunication or you can't get that communication through, it can become frustrating. More so with yourself, how do I, because you want to be able to point down at something on a table and say, look, the right goes right here. And sometimes that makes sense, but you don't always have that easy ability to do the visual.
Another children's game that just came out this year from Hava, which has excellent children's games for a roll and write, is Color It. And the wonderful thing is it's numbers and colors for kids to help, and they color in a picture.
Is that a roll and write?
The roll and write, yeah.
What was that company?
From Hava.
Hava, okay.
H-A-B-A,
Okay.
USA. They're based out of Germany. They come over to the US. I would say that they are the #1 children's game for especially the younger kids. If you're looking 8 and under, 10 and under games.
It looks like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their kids' games are often.
And that's a great game there too for kids, Rhino.
Yeah. Actually, this was sold to me in a game store in Portland, and the guy was like, "It's a kid's game, but a lot of people use it as a drinking game." So I was like, "All right, not that I would use it for that, but basically, it's like a funny comic take on Jenga, where you're just stacking up floors and floors." But those, I mean, there are a lot. And the thing is, actually, when you're able to get back together, there are so many games out there that sort of hit that 8-year-old target market too. And I think that the 8-year-old, 8+ games are probably the sweet spot for older adults playing with younger kids too. All right, anything else? All right, then I'm going to stop the recording.